We are living in a time when tensions and anxiety are high. With the challenges associated with COVID, race, and economic insecurity, it's been too easy for people to devolve into their baser instincts of anger, prejudice, and indifference. Despite the abundance of negativity, I find encouragement by seeing expressions of love, compassion, and respect. As much as we can focus on our differences, it's our desire to love and to be loved that reveals our commonality. This has been the focus of photographer Be Proud, who after years as a successful commercial photographer began a personal project that focused on long-term relationships between gay and lesbian couples titled First Comes Love. She has followed up that project with Transcending Love, which focuses on members of the transgender community. These projects were born from a desire to use her talents and experience to make a difference. It demonstrates the power available to all of us who wield a camera. This is Ibarian X, and welcome back to The Candid Frame. All right, well, welcome to the show. It's a real pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I got to start off with your name. It's just awesome.
Right? I got so lucky. People ask me all the time, like, or they say, oh, that's so clever. And I'm like, well, no, not really. It's the name I was born with. But, you know, when you're a lesbian photographer, I mean, you can't do anything but go by Be Proud. And the challenge is that you have to live up to it.
Yeah, so when you started your business well over 20 years ago, did you immediately know that that's how you were going to be, you wanted to be known?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah, that was an easy one. The weird thing is, too, that there's so many people in my family whose names begin with a B, between my family and cousins, but nobody ever went down that road. So I guess they saved it for me.
Oh, okay. So what was the catalyst for you? Because a lot of people pick up photography and they enjoy it and they take great pleasure in it. But not everyone makes the leap to actually trying to do it as a way of making a living. What was it about it that made you feel like, no, this is what I want to do, not only for my own creativity, but to earn a living?
Yeah, the earning a living part is the hard part. But I knew I wanted to be a photographer, but not from really at an early age. I had taken a photography class in high school. It was actually the very first photography class that they offered. So we just had a little closet with an enlarger in it. So I loved it. And then I went off to college and I thought I was, getting into law. And then after spending a semester in the law library, I said, no, I need to do something with my hands. And I had always drawn and was very artistic, but I had just never thought of that as my avocation. So anyway, I knew I really loved photography, and I really loved not only the artistic part of it, but the technical part of it too. So the geek part of me really liked the equipment and the chemistry and all that stuff. So I decided that needed to be my major, and I would see where that took me. The making a living part was the tough part because I really wasn't trained as a commercial photographer, so I had to learn all that stuff myself.
Yeah. And make a lot of mistakes along the way, I'm sure.
Yeah. I made some mistakes at the expense of the United States government. I moved to Europe in the 80s during the Reagan years and got a job with the United States military as a photographer. So,
oh, really? Okay.
I was there for 7 years.
Wow. That's a good way of being able to cut your teeth on it.
It was pretty crazy. Yeah, I did every kind of photography that they needed, from passport pictures of babies to portraits of 4-star generals to legal things. I flew in helicopters to take pictures of landscapes, and I was actually at the Air Force base where, if you remember the Iranian hostages, that's where they would bring all of the hostages. So I actually had access that was even more personal than all of the news agencies that were there. It was crazy.
Okay. I tell me if I'm wrong, but I would suspect that diversity of experience probably made it a little easier to hang your hat as a commercial photographer and not have to sort of just create a real narrow niche for yourself because you had so much experience.
Yeah, it did. I mean, I kind of came back to be with my family as my parents got older. I thought I needed to be here. But when I told people that I had just come back from Europe, that sort of perked up their ears and made them pay a little bit more attention to what I was about. A female photographer, and, there were a lot of men with sexy Latin names, and they were getting all the work. So they're like, oh, who's this?
So did you feel like there was a certain point where that was sort of a breakthrough moment or a series of events that you felt like, okay, I can actually do this. This is doable?
I just kept at it. I mean, I got magazine jobs at first, and then, things came along. And, the nice thing is if you do a good job, then they want you to come back and they can trust you and you get hired again. And so I had some art directors that trusted me, and I was pretty much a generalist. So I did a lot of work for all kinds of organizations, banks, corporations. I did a lot of food photography for a while. So I've done a lot of things.
So what was the impetus for the First Comes Love project?
Well, that was a series of events that brought that along. So I had been taking pictures very different from that for a while. I had been doing some very up close botanical studies, so very kind of Georgia O'Keeffe-esque, you would say. And I had been exhibiting that kind of work and really loved doing that. And it was sort of, that project was kind of coming to a close, or I had felt like, okay, what's coming next? And I wasn't sure. And then my then partner, now wife, and I, 2008, we celebrated our 20th year together. This is before the marriage equality laws, so we had no protections, basically. And on that day, we became the longest relationship in our families. So everyone else was on their second, third, and fourth tries, with the exception of a few relationships that ended at till death do us part. So they were no longer in the running. But of the existing relationships, we were the longest relationship. Not only that, but we were basically the go-to couple. People came to us for everything. We were the powers of attorney, the executors of wills, the elder care providers, the pet sitters, the godparents to all the nieces and nephews, and the executors of the ex's wills even. So we were the stable couple, but we just didn't have all the rights and recognition that everyone else had. So we were accepted by our family, but we just didn't have the same kind of validation as the heterosexual relationships. So that was beginning to wear on me, that, we just didn't count as much. And then the next month, Barack Obama was elected president. And I thought, okay, well, this is a good thing for the country. But at the same time, Proposition 8 passed in California, and a few other measures in Arkansas, Arizona, and Florida, I think it was. And it kind of was the tip of the iceberg for me. It just infuriated me that, I had seen too much of people using religion and all sorts of other excuses about why people can't be together if they're of the same sex. And I just lost it, basically. Right after that, we also had an economic crash. So I lost a lot of work for the coming year. And I decided, well, okay, what are you going to do next? Because you still have to work. Yeah. Maybe I can do something that will make a difference. I tell my students to, use their art as their voice. And so I thought, okay, well, walk the walk. And I decided, okay, I'm going to try to make a difference and see what I can do as one person with the skills that I have. How can I try to change people's minds? I figured everything that people see in the media are gay pride parades or protests, sort of the extremities of our community. So I thought, well, I want to try to show the other side, the day-to-day side, that what people's lives are really like. So I decided that I would do, I don't want to say intimate portraits, but these environmental portraits that would show the emotion of the couple and the soul of the couple in their own environment. And I decided to strip away all of the rainbow imagery by doing them in black and white, and ask people to really look and see who these couples were and are. And in the meantime, I also decided, well, why don't you learn something new in the process? So I decided to learn video so that I could do video interviews, and I would then have not only video footage, but I would be able to have a recording that I could then write a story that would accompany each portrait. So that would add another level of understanding for the viewer to see not only just, oh, isn't this a loving couple, but here are all the things that they've gone through in their 50 years together, and see if I can't, touch some heartstrings.
How did you find the first couple that you photographed?
That was an easy one because, again, we'd been together for 20 years, so I knew other people that had been together a long time, and my best friend, I had photographed them at their 15th year together, and I went back to that portrait and just loved it so much. And I thought, well, this is the kind of portrait I really would like to take. So they were the first couple, and at that point, they had been together for 30 years. So
that's a good run.
Yeah,
I'm catching up on that. I've been together with my wife for about 26 going on 27.
Well, I think we're approaching 32 in October. So,
oh, congratulations!
Yeah, so that was the first portrait. That was, I'm going to see how this goes with them, and see how this video taping goes with somebody that I know and I'm close to, and they'll forgive me if I'm stumbling a little bit with the technology. And then I went from there. I just reached out to other people I knew and said, "This is what I'm doing, and are you interested, or can you put this out to your network and see who might be interested?" And then I just started making portraits.
Did the concept change at all as the more and more you started photographing and interviewing people?
The only thing that changed was when I first started out, I wanted it to be couples that had been together for 20 years or more. Mm-hmm. But I found that two things. Number one, that would make the demographic older and possibly not appeal to a younger audience. And there were a lot of people that had been together in the teens years, 14, 17, 15, who wanted to participate. So I decided to drop that barrier to the 10-year mark. So couples had to be together for 10 years. And that went pretty well, because then I have quite a range of the shortest couple is 11 years, and the longest one is, at the time was 59 years. So I was able to show, okay, there's this longevity, but also give hope to a younger demographic that, oh yeah, this could be you. So,
in terms of where did you go to make these photographs? Did you travel extensively? Was it limited geographically to a certain area because of just practicality?
Well, I started in the Mideast, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, and then I just expanded from there. I went up to as far as Massachusetts, New Hampshire. I went down to Florida, and then California a few times, Chicago, and I have another couple from Texas. So I wasn't covering as much of the country as I wanted to, but I wasn't really focusing on the geographic diversity that much. More so the longevity, the number of years, and I spent most of 2013 really trying to get as much ethnic diversity as I could. So there got to be a point where I would have a gay male couple in their 40s, and they would bring on like 20 more gay men in their 40s. So all of them white. And I said, okay, great, you're on my list, but we'll have to see how this goes. And so I really tried to get as much other diversity as I possibly could to make it more valid.
I love the idea of these conversations that you had with them, that you recorded with them to sort of flesh out their stories rather than being these, these static images. But I'm curious to hear how your understanding of relationships, just period, not only theirs, but your own, what discoveries did you make as a result of having these conversations with people who had these relationships over a span of so many years?
So first of all, I started out with, I'm going to do the video interview first, because then people will relax, they'll talk for a while, and it'll make the portrait easier. So I was wrong. Because people talk so long about themselves that there was little time left for the portrait. The portrait got rushed. Okay. So I had to switch my game plan and start off with the portrait and then go with the interview. But I think the coolest thing, I would say 99.9% of the couples in talking about how much they loved each other cried. Mm-hmm. They got so emotional and so touched. And I did too. I'm getting goosebumps just telling you about it.
Yeah. You think that part of that emotionality came from the fact that they were really given the opportunity to really talk about their relationship in such an open and sincere way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's giving voice to a community that's been, not really celebrated. It's been a battle. Everything has been a fight, a protest, a fight for rights. And so, this is a way to talk about not all of the rights and wrongs, but this is how we live. This is who we are. And to hear the stories about, from some of the older couples, what it was like to be in the bars in the 60s in New York when they would flash the lights, and that meant that you had to switch partners and go to a partner of the opposite sex because the police were coming in. Another woman who had one of the very first gay radio stations in the country, and how people would listen to it in their cars. They would go outside. They'd be home, but they go outside and listen to it in their car because they didn't want anybody to know they were listening to this radio station. So, I mean, there are some really eye-opening stories for me.
There's one of the videos. They had this couple that were from Canada, and they had gotten married in Canada, and they talked about going back and forth between there and the United States, and going from the United States into Canada. They could go to the border, or to when they're dealing with that as a couple, but when they were coming into the States, they had to come in like separately.
Yeah,
and I was just like, this is not that long ago. And just the idea of having to adjust your behavior in that way. And it's just because of who you choose to be with.
Right.
It's just, it's heartbreaking.
Back to our families, like, and our straight friends, like nobody ever realized what it takes for, at that time, a gay couple to be together. So you had to spend a lot of money on all kinds of legal protections to make sure that, you both owned the house and you both had access to each other's medical records and could make medical decisions and all that stuff that they just get automatically and assume, oh, you're together. Well, you get to do this. Well, actually, no, you don't. So, and sometimes even when you do have the papers, you get kicked out of the hospital or not allowed in the room. And,
Well, one of the things when you're creating a body of work, especially over time, there's a point where you're just accumulating the work. And then at some point you have to sort of sit down and try to make sense of what you're actually doing, and about whether it's working, whether or not there are holes in it. Talk to me about that process, and how the process of culling, evaluating the images helped to sort of shape it into more than you might have thought initially.
I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to educate. I wasn't necessarily making a body of work for myself. I was making a body of work for my community and to try to make a difference. So I knew I had a goal in mind. And for starters, that was exhibitions and to get the work out into the public sphere where people could see it. And ultimately, I wanted it to be a book as well, because I thought that having a book would make it a lot more accessible to other people who might not, they're in Arkansas and there's not going to be an exhibition in Arkansas. So how do I see these portraits? How do I read these stories? So I knew I wanted to do that. And so the timing of it was pretty deliberate as well. So I started in 2009, and as I approached 2013, I started to see what a pretty remarkable collection I had. Besides the everyday people like myself and my friends, I had a lot of the movers and shakers, if you will, in the community and in the fight for marriage equality. I had Bishop Gene Robinson, I had Barbara Giddings and Kayla Hoosen, I had both of the Proposition 8 couples, I had the first couple that was married in Washington, D.C., the first couple that was married in the state of Delaware. and several more. And so I thought this, like, oh, wow, this is really quite something. And at this time in our history, the one portrait that would make this whole would be Edie Windsor. And it took me the better part of a year to get her to agree to do it. And once I had her, I knew that I had a super collection of portraits and stories at this time in history, right between the marriage equality decisions of 2013 and 2015. So then that was for me the time that I needed to make a book.
And for people who don't know, tell us who Edie is.
Edie Windsor is she's no longer with us, sadly, but the octogenarian that really brought the marriage equality case to the courts when nobody was ready to do it, when Freedom to Marry wasn't ready, when the Human Rights Campaign wasn't yet ready. She said, I'm ready. Her partner of 40 years died, and the government said, you owe us this enormous amount of money in taxes because you're not related. And she fought back, and she won. I mean, she's a Spitfire. God bless her. She did it. That for me is, now I have a collection that nobody else has, really. I mean, there are a lot of books out there about the fight for marriage equality, but it's mostly about who fought the cases and how the cases were won and why the cases were won and that process. But the collection I have, the exhibition, the book, is about who they were won for and why.
Yeah. I recently read that there were well over 1 million podcasts listed on the Apple Podcast app. That's amazing, because I remember when there were only a few thousand. Though it's easy to get lost among so many shows, I'm so glad that we've been able to find an audience that loves and appreciates what we do. We enjoy tens of thousands of downloads each month from people all over the world, which we appreciate. But as a listener-supported show, we are especially thankful for those of you who choose to support our show financially through our Patreon effort. Your contributions provide the means to pay for the show and provide me the time to do it. If it weren't for you, it would be impossible to do this work. So I'm very grateful. If you have yet to come on board as a Patreon supporter, you can do so today. You can contribute as little as $5 a month by visiting patreon.com/thecandidframe. This modest amount adds up as our support grows. So if you have enjoyed the show and the work we're doing, please come on board as a Patreon supporter today. Thank you. I've had several conversations with people who start projects, and just as a result of how things are manifesting in the world, all of a sudden the work becomes timely, right? But the person at the time couldn't have anticipated that. It was just like, no, I just want to make this work. And all of a sudden things started culminating and just start moving in towards each other. And all of a sudden it's like it was meant to happen. Did you feel that way?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was the right time in history to do that. It's the right time in history to do the next project as well. So.
Well, one of the things I learned in doing my research for you is that you initially looked at traditional publishers to publish the book, but that didn't happen, and you went and self-published. So tell me about the kind of feedback that you were getting from traditional publishers when you put out the idea of publishing the book with them.
Well, if you go to a lot of the publishers' websites, they'll tell you how to submit and what they want. And then at the end of that whole page of things, it says, and we're not accepting submissions. So you kind of have to go through the back door. You have to either have an agent or you have to know someone who knows someone who knows someone. And I knew a few someones who were able to put the book in front of people. And I managed to get it in front of a few people myself. So, but at all of those publishing houses, they all turned it down. I mean, they just said, I wanted to make an art book, and that's a costly endeavor. And we're not going to make any money. No, thank you. One said, well, we just did a book like this. And they didn't. We just did a book about famous lesbians. Okay, so that's not this book. Have you looked at the news? It's 2013. But they all said no. And I did actually have a few independent photo book publishers who would agree to do it if I gave them a really, really big sum of money.
Yeah.
In other words, I had to pay for the book myself. So if I was going to do that, I thought, well, why don't I just do the book that I want to do and get what I want and it'll look how I want it. And, I probably will make some mistakes, but I know some really talented people. I know a great designer and I know great digital people and I know people who can help me get this done. And it will be pretty good, I think. And, so I'm going to do it myself. It was scary. It was really scary.
I bet. How long was that journey?
It took me 6 years to get the whole thing together and write all of the stories. And then they had to get, edited as I went along by someone who was just a better writer than I am. And then it went to the designer and we went back and forth with what the cover should look like and what the font should be and, how big the font should be. And then we had to sequence the images. So I worked with a colleague at the University of the Arts and we would put all the images up on the wall and look at, how they flowed into each other and who would be next to whom. And decided to put all of the marriage equality people, kind of the political couples in the middle. And then it went off to the publisher. Well, getting a printer was another thing because I got estimates from around the world, really. Italy, Iceland, Germany, China, the US. And in the end, I needed to go to the one in China because it was the most affordable. And one company came highly recommended to me, and they actually did some things to prove that they could do the job and did examples like send us some files. We'll send you a proof. See what you think. So they convinced me that they could do it. So when I sent them the files, it was May, right before Memorial Day. And the next day I saw a double rainbow. So I thought, okay, that's a good sign. And it was August when I got my sample books and close to the end of September when I got the shipment.
That must have been a very special day when you opened up that box and you saw that and held it in your hands.
Yeah, it was. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it. And I have to credit my wife for helping me get that done because she made me buy those 3 big erasable calendars and put the deadlines on the calendars where I could see them from a distance. And I was like, okay, this date, this has to happen. And this date, this has to happen. And this date, this has to happen. And so it got done.
So what was the response to the work, not only in terms of, you releasing this book, but the exhibitions that you had subsequently?
Oh, the exhibitions have been amazing, really. Starting with the very first one, which was in Western New York State. So at a community college. And the gallery director there really believed in me and loved the work. And he did an amazing job of putting this show together. It took 2 years, but he got some grants and things. And it was beautiful. And I had to speak to the audience before the opening reception. So they have an auditorium and you go into the auditorium and you speak to the audience and then you go into the gallery. We did that and I got some amazing response just from that talk from people that said, we have a daughter who's gay. We had no idea that she faced this kind of discrimination, the things that you told us about, and we're going to go home and call her right away. And then a few weeks later, after I got back, I got an email from a young woman who I met that night, and she was, I think, 20 or 21 years old. And she emailed me and said, this exhibition, I felt like I had come home. Like I had never seen anything like that before. I don't get any kind of support here in this community. you've given me hope that someday I can have a relationship like this. For me, that was worth every penny I had spent. I had another, the stories are amazing that in Washington State, these two men came with their, they had like 6 or 8 adopted children. They all came in, all dressed up, coats and ties, dresses. And the guy came over to me and just hugged me and cried and said, we brought our children to see this, to tell them, for them to see that they're not the only family like this.
Yeah, because I can imagine that for many of these families, there are, within the communities in which they live, they're very isolated. They may have friends and other families that are basically their support group, but they're not necessarily close, in terms of physical proximity. There's still kind of an island in there, and that can be really difficult, because I would imagine it's just like you can never really have a sense of how your neighbors or the people around you are going to respond. So there's this kind of tentative cautiousness that you constantly have to be perpetually sort of practicing, and just that sort of constant tension.
I don't hold back anymore. I just, if people ask what I'm doing, I just take a deep breath and say, okay, here we go. So there's just so many success stories from the exhibitions and the response from people, and the fact that it has touched people in certain ways, that I've seen it used as a marriage proposal, the book itself as a wedding gift, an anniversary gift. One couple came to me and asked me to photograph their wedding, and it was going to be the two of them and their witnesses, and that was it, because their families just were not accepting. So they said, would you do it? And I said, yeah, of course. And I gave them a copy of the book, and she said, okay, I have to go right now. I have to go give this book to my mother to read, and maybe she'll get it. And when I went to photograph the wedding, there were 100 people there.
Oh my God.
So, and then one of the coolest thing, really, those, I don't know, maybe it's not the coolest. They're all great moments, but there was an exhibition in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center about gay rights and the Supreme Court. And it had all kinds of, stuff from some of the legends. And one of my photographs was in it, but they asked me, the organizing committee said, we want to buy 9 copies of your book. And I said, okay. And they said, well, will you come to this press conference and will you sign the books? And I said, yes. So I went. I didn't know what was going on. So the mayor of Philadelphia signed the books, and they had all these dignitaries to sign the books, and they were spread out around these 2 tables. And above each of the books was a letter to one of the Supreme Court justices, inviting them to come to the exhibition and to understand what our lives are about, right before the 2015 marriage equality decision, the Obergefell decision. So it was the invitation. So
that is crazy.
The book is inside. It made it into the Supreme Court because it wasn't a gift; it was an invitation. So they can't accept gifts, and it wasn't that; it was the invite to come.
Wow, that must have been an amazing feeling when you realized how it was being used in that way.
It was, and then I went to the Supreme Court the day of the oral arguments, and it was really emotional to know that my book was in there.
Oh, wow.
So I can't claim, responsibility for the way the decision went by any means, but just to be, to have a part in that feels good.
Well, let's talk about an extension of what you've already been doing, this project called Transcending Love. Tell us about that and what propelled you to do this.
Well, as soon as I published First Comes Love, as soon as the book came out, everybody loved it and wanted to know when I would do the volume 2, because now they want to be a part of it. I just say, well, yeah, I can't do that right now. First of all, when you self-publish, you wear all the hats. You're the publicist. You have to contact the bookstores directly and ask them to take the book. You have to try to go to bookstores and do talks if they'll have you. And not only that, but the exhibitions and all that. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and it costs a lot of money. So it was not like I could just rush into the next thing. And the exhibition was still traveling. So the exhibition traveled for at least 2 more years. And I was going to those exhibitions too. So I thought, no, I can't do this. And then we had another election in 2016, and that went the wrong way. And I said, oh no, oh no. And it was pretty clear very quickly that there was going to be a lot more to fight for in a hurry. But I had already done, I had already done the one project, and I didn't see any point in repeating that. And I knew that the trans community, the gender nonconforming, the non-binary community, that's the community that needs the love and the acceptance. Those are the people that have not had nearly enough attention, protections forever. So I thought, well, I will do the same sort of thing, but I want to do it for that community only. And I decided, well, I'll continue to make it different than any of the other projects I had seen about transgender people. I would continue with my theme of couples and love and, what it takes to be together. And this time it's what it takes to be together when you are in a relationship and one partner decides to transition, or you have transitioned and you meet someone. And so all of those things. So not with the longevity factor this time, but just this is people are in love, and they want to be able to be in love and be together and be accepted for who they are. So I made it my mission to do that, and it's going great.
But one of the differences between this and the former book is that the former was in black and white, and this one is in color. Why is that? Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought this one would be in black and white too, but as soon as I took the first picture, it was pretty clear that it needed to be in color, because the transgender community is anything but black and white. It's a full spectrum of different relationships and people, and it spoke to me as needing to be in full color.
Mm. One of the things we talked about earlier was that when people saw the exhibit and they saw the book, is that they felt like they had learned something as a result of it. With you focusing on the transgender community, and as you started interviewing these people and photographing, did you find that you yourself were learning something that you hadn't known before?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, this project isn't about the medical transitions or surgeries or body parts or any of that. This is about just people being people. I was surprised at some of the things I learned because, there had already been all of these bathroom bills in North Carolina and so forth, and for me, it was just like, oh, yeah, I mean, why can't people just go to the bathroom? I mean, I didn't understand why they would have laws like that. But I didn't really understand the full extent of that until I started really talking to people and getting to know people, that you really have to figure out your life based on if you will have to go to the bathroom. You want to go out to dinner with your partner and you have to decide, will I need to use the restroom? Will I be safe using the restroom? Or you're going out for the day in public and can I use a bathroom in a government building? It's a thing. And, it's easier for some people than others, but everybody is at some point they're at the beginning of their transition. So they can be kind of in between not transitioning and transitioning. So it can be scary because they're not perceived as one, I hate to say one gender or the other, but they're not perceived as a man or male or female. And it can be a problem.
Yeah. And not to diminish that, but just especially the loss of life that's been happening to many in the transgender community, especially those of color, to feel like you have to actually fear for your life just because of how you identify.
I don't know
an
if you
incredible
looked
burden
at
to carry.
That section of the website at all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as I was traveling, I thought, okay, I thought I was doing really important work and really good work, but I felt like something was missing. I just didn't know what it was, that, I don't feel like I'm doing enough. And then I kept hearing about the deaths of transgender people, like, every month there was another one, and it had been rising exponentially since 2016. I started looking up the history of violence, typically fatal violence against the trans community, and I saw that it was in so many different cities around the country, and I was traveling to so many cities around the country. I've been to 24 states now, and so I decided, I'm going to pay homage here. I'm going to go to the spot where somebody has been murdered.
Yeah.
As close as I can come to it. I mean, sometimes it's a lake and I don't know where on that lake it was. And sometimes it's an intersection. And I know, it was this intersection, but I don't know the exact piece of pavement where a body was found. But I go there and I reflect and I stay there and just think about this person, and I say their name and I ask the universe for some healing and some hope and some protection. And I make a photograph, and I make it during the day, not at night when things are probably, when the murders probably happened, but, just in the bright light of day, so that the pictures look rather innocuous at first. And then you realize, oh. So, I feel like I'm showing a really bright side of the community and celebrating the couples in the community, but people can live day to day having to fear for their lives. So I need to show that too. And I think that would bring people to, if I can get people to say, oh, wow, these are amazing people, and I need to be more accepting. But then it's, when you see the next part, it's like, and I need to do something because this is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that one of the strengths about those images is that the locations are so banal. They're so ordinary. And then to have to think about the horrible thing that happened there makes it, I think, a little more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you hear about it in the news, it's elsewhere, some nebulous place to some nebulous person. But when you see the faces of these couples and then you see the location, I think it just allows at least a small way of being able to connect to the humanity of the circumstances.
I hope so. I haven't quite figured out how the two parts of the project will live together. I mean, it's easy on the website, but I don't know in exhibition how that might appear, or in a publication how that might appear, if it needs to be two different publications. I don't know. I don't know. If that will still evolve.
Yeah. And that's part of the journey when you're making work, because like I mentioned earlier, when you're in the midst of creating the work, all you have to do is just create the work. You don't have to necessarily start figuring out what the end result is going to be. There's enough to do already.
Yeah, and I didn't know I'd be going down that road. It just happened.
So you teach, and how has this experience helped inform how you teach your students how to work on their own personal projects that you might? What kind of insight have you gained that you share with your students that you might have not had before?
I share everything with my students. I teach studio lighting, so in a 2-semester, 2-part class, and then I also teach a class that's it's called professional practices. So it's basically how to be out in the world and be a professional and get your work seen and do all the things that adult artists have to do. But I share everything with both of those classes and my successes and failures. And it makes it very real for them. They see my struggles. When I was about to publish the book, I asked my class, I don't know what to title this, because, I've got First Comes Love, but what's the subtitle? Is it queer relationships? Is it LGBT relationships? Is it how do I title this? Because if it was 5 years hence, queer might be okay. But for a lot of people, queer is derogatory. It's cool with the younger generation, but it's not with the older generation. So what word do I need to use that will be fitting here? And they can see that process that I go through. And several of my I guess they were already former students, assisted me in that project. So, which was great that we got to work together and I could see that they were learning something. But I showed them, okay, I'm going to develop this promotional materials for this project now, and this is what it's going to look like, and this is why I'm going to do it this way. And now I'm going to apply for a grant, and this is how you apply for a grant, and you might not get that grant, and you might not get 10 grants. So you just have to keep at it. And it's just a sharing process. And I have no qualms about sharing every single part of it.
Well, my last question that I ask each guest is I ask them to recommend a photographer that my listeners can discover and explore on their own. And it can be anyone, someone you've long admired or someone you've recently discovered. So who would that one photographer be and why?
Oh, wow. There's so many. Well, one of my heroes right now is Zanelli Maholi. So I love her. I just totally respect what she's doing and I'm completely amazed. And if I have her book, it sits next to me. It's on my bedside table because I think it's just the greatest thing.
Tell us about the work.
Well, she's South African, and it's really a lot about they're all self-portraits, really. The work she's doing now, they're all self-portraits, but they're of, her vision of herself with she when you first see the pictures, they look like it's a portrait of someone in just, I would say, some African-American garb or something. But she's really using these, like she might be using toilet paper rolls or these, paper clips, or she makes these elaborate necklaces with them just to show that they're the most simple things that can make these portraits beautiful. And she adjusts the color and the tonality. She darkens the tonality of her skin, seriously. And then, so her eyes are bright white. It's amazing. You have to see it.
I gotta check that out.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And thank you for your time this afternoon. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. It was very nice. And I think our color coordination here is really good.
Yes, people can't see that, but... Thanks to Bea for joining us. Find out more about her and her work by visiting BeProudPhoto.com and firstcomeslove.org. If you're a devoted listener and subscribe to the show, write us a review on whatever service you listen to podcasts. Those reviews have allowed us to grow. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and our mailing list. On the YouTube channel, I offer critiques on images submitted by TCF listeners like you, while the mailing list keeps you updated with all TCF events, including workshops and more. Sign up today. And remember, you can support the show by contributing to our Patreon effort or making a one-time or reoccurring donation through PayPal. Thanks to Jeffrey Saldinger, Jason Randolph, Art Venable, David E. Vikalski, and Junie for their recent contributions. We also provide a series of ebooks on photography available for purchase on our website. It's my way of sharing my experience and knowledge, and another way for you to support the show. And if you can't find every episode of the show, download the Candid Frame app, which is available for both Apple iOS and Android. And because of your generosity, it's free to download and use. No additional purchases are required. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer, Cynthia Parker, and our music is from Kevin MacLeod, whose royalty-free music can be found at Incompetech.com. And this is Ibadian X, and this is The Candid Frame.